What if suffering isn't just an accident of human existence, but the very thing that gives life its depth? For centuries, philosophers have wrestled with this paradox. Aristotle saw tragedy as a mirror of human nature. The Stoics treated pain as training for the soul. Buddhism built its entire foundation on the truth of suffering. And yet today, we often see suffering as nothing more than a glitch, something to erase, something to avoid. But here's the real question. Is suffering simply a problem to fix? Or is it the very condition for wisdom, empathy, and meaning? That's what we're exploring today. From Stoic resilience to Buddhist insight, from Nietzsche's provocations to Viktor Frankl's testimony. This is a journey into the heart of human struggle. And before we begin, I want you to do something. Don't just watch this video. Think with me. If philosophy matters to you, subscribe and join this community. Together, we'll keep questioning the ideas that shape how we live. So, what do we actually mean by necessary suffering? Suffering isn't just about physical pain. It's heartbreak. It's disappointment. It's the emptiness you feel when things don't turn out the way you hoped. Philosophically, suffering is the gap between what we desire and what reality gives us. And in that gap, life feels heavy. But the deeper question is this: does that heaviness serve a purpose? Or is it just meaningless misery? Let's start with biology. Here's the thing. Pain is useful. It isn't some cruel punishment or proof that life is unfair. It's a survival mechanism. Imagine for a moment that you couldn't feel pain. Sounds nice at first, right? But think about what that would actually mean. You could rest your hand on a burning stove, and because nothing hurts, you'd leave it there until your skin was destroyed. You could twist your ankle while running, and without the sharp signal of pain, you'd keep walking until the bones splintered completely. Pain is your body's alarm system. It shouts, "Something is wrong. Stop now." That's why it exists. It's nature's way of protecting us from damage we might not even notice until it's too late. From an evolutionary perspective, this system is brilliant. Animals that felt pain survived longer, avoided dangerous behaviors, and passed on their genes. Pain is the reason your ancestors made it long enough for you to be here today. But humans didn't stop with physical pain. We evolved something new, something strange. We suffer in ways that go far beyond survival. We feel grief when someone we love dies. That doesn't protect our bodies, but it shapes our bonds and communities. We feel anxiety when the future is uncertain. That doesn't heal wounds, but it pushes us to prepare. We feel heartbreak, disappointment, even the heavy dread that life itself might lack meaning. And here's the paradox. None of these forms of suffering are directly about survival, yet they are deeply human. They mark the difference between simply staying alive and actually being alive. Think about it. Without grief, would love mean as much? Without anxiety, would we care to plan for the future? Without heartbreak, would joy have the same depth when it finally arrives? So maybe suffering isn't just biology's alarm bell anymore. Maybe it has become something else entirely, a signal not only of survival, but of humanity itself. Because when you step back and look at it, our ability to feel not only pain, but loss, longing, and despair is part of what makes our existence so profoundly real. Now let's jump to the Stoics. For them, suffering was never the enemy. It wasn't something to run from or curse at the sky about. The Stoics saw suffering as training, a kind of gym for the soul. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who spent much of his life in war camps, facing betrayal, plague, and endless responsibility, wrote these words: "The obstacle is the way." In other words, the very thing that blocks your path is the path. Hardship doesn't stop you from growing, it's the invitation to grow. Then there's Epictetus, a philosopher who was born into slavery. His life began in chains, and yet he became one of the greatest teachers of resilience in history. To his students, he gave a reminder that feels just as urgent today as it did 2,000 years ago. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. That's the essence of Stoicism. Life will hand you suffering. You don't get to decide whether storms will come, but you do get to decide whether you'll be crushed by them, or whether you'll use them to grow stronger. The Stoics believed suffering is necessary because it forges character. It's the fire that hardens steel. Without difficulty, courage remains theoretical. Without pain, discipline never matures. Without setbacks, resilience is just a nice word on a page. Think about it. A soldier who never trains doesn't win battles. Muscles that are never tested never grow. The Stoics believed the same was true for the mind and the spirit. If we avoid every hardship, if we live only in comfort, we don't actually live. We decay. But when we meet suffering with the right mindset, something remarkable happens. We transform. We become people who can stand firm in the face of chaos. People who don't shatter under pressure, but adapt. For the Stoics, suffering wasn't proof that life was cruel. It was proof that life was an opportunity. Every difficulty, every obstacle, every loss was a test, and passing that test meant becoming stronger, wiser, and more unshakable. But in Buddhism, the view shifts. The very first noble truth is this: life is suffering. Now at first that sounds bleak. It almost sounds hopeless, like the universe is nothing but pain. But that's not what Buddhism is saying. The point isn't that life is meaningless. The point is that everything in life is temporary. Think about it. Health fades. Even the strongest body eventually weakens. Relationships change. People we love grow distant or pass away. Success slips through our fingers. No matter how high we climb, the mountain keeps crumbling beneath us. And here's the hard truth. It's not change itself that hurts us most. It's our clinging. Our desperate attempt to hold on to what cannot be held. That grasping, that resistance. That's where suffering truly lives. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. That's how attachment works. The more we cling to youth, to wealth, to status, to control, the more we suffer when they inevitably shift and fade. But here's the key. Buddhism doesn't glorify suffering. It doesn't tell you to seek it out or wear it like a badge of honor. Instead, it teaches us to understand suffering, to see it clearly for what it is. And once we see it, we can start loosening our grip. It's not about running away from life. It is about learning how to let go of the illusions that make life heavier than it needs to be. Meditation, mindfulness, compassion. These are tools to help us notice our attachments and gently release them. When we do, the suffering begins to soften. So in Buddhism, suffering is seen as necessary, but not in the sense of punishment, and not even as something to celebrate. It's necessary as a wake-up call, a signal that tells us, pay attention. You are clinging to something impermanent. Let go, or it will break you. The goal isn't to drown in suffering. The goal is to transcend it, to move beyond the cycle of craving and loss. In that sense, suffering becomes not an enemy, but a teacher pointing toward liberation. And maybe that's the most radical idea of all. That freedom isn't found in controlling life, but in learning to flow with it, moment by moment, breath by breath, without clinging. Now let's fast forward to modern philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find meaning in the suffering." For Nietzsche, suffering wasn't just unavoidable, it was creative. Struggle, difficulty, even despair. These weren't detours from life. They were the raw material of life itself. Without them, there could be no strength, no art, no greatness. He believed that it was precisely through challenge that human beings transcend themselves. The suffering we endure pushes us beyond who we were yesterday, forcing us to become something more. In Nietzsche's eyes, hardship wasn't a tragedy, it was a forge. And then, decades later, another voice echoed the same truth from an even darker place. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps of the Holocaust, wrote that those who found meaning, even in unbearable suffering, were more likely to survive. Surrounded by hunger, death, and unimaginable cruelty, Frankl observed something profound. Not everyone who endured those conditions lost their will to live. The difference wasn't strength, or youth, or health. It was whether or not they could connect their suffering to a deeper purpose. For some, that purpose was the hope of seeing loved ones again. For others, it was the dream of finishing their life's work. For Frankl himself, it was the determination to share this insight with the world. That meaning is what allows us to endure the unendurable. His message was simple, but profound. You don't get to choose your suffering, but you do get to choose your response. This choice, this freedom, is what defines us. Even when everything is stripped away, even when circumstances seem impossible, there remains this one power, the ability to decide how we will face our pain. Nietzsche saw suffering as a catalyst for greatness. Frankl saw it as the ground where meaning takes root. Together they remind us that suffering doesn't just destroy, it can also create. It can break us down, but it can also build us up if we dare to ask, what meaning can I make from this? But you do get to choose your response. But wait, let's not get carried away. Not all suffering is noble. Not all pain teaches poverty, war, systemic injustice. These aren't spiritual lessons. They're preventable human failures. And yes, some suffering can make us stronger, just breaks people. Trauma doesn't always lead to wisdom. Sometimes it just leaves scars. That's why we have to be careful not to romanticize suffering. It can be a teacher, but it's not the only one. Love, joy, curiosity, and wonder. They can grow us too. So what do we do with suffering in our own lives? Philosophy gives us 3 guiding lights. From the Stoics, reframe what happens. Ask, how can I grow stronger through this? From Buddhism, notice your attachments. Ask, what am I clinging to that makes this harder? From Existentialism, create meaning. Ask, what purpose can I build from this pain? These don't erase suffering, but they transform how we carry it. So, is suffering truly necessary? On one hand, yes. It protects us. It shapes us. It connects us through empathy. On the other hand, much of it is unnecessary. And it's our responsibility, as humans, as communities, to reduce that suffering whenever we can. Maybe the real answer is this: suffering isn't the purpose of life, but it is one of life's greatest teachers. And the choice is always ours. Will we let it crush us, or will we let it carve us into something wiser, stronger, and more compassionate? If this exploration gave you a new perspective on the philosophy of suffering, give this video a like. It helps more people find it. Subscribe if you want weekly deep dives into Stoicism, Buddhism, and existential thought. And share your voice in the comments. What's the most important lesson suffering has taught you? Because the way we answer that question doesn't just change philosophy, it changes how we live.